Hello, class of 95. This is Amit Basic, also from the class of 95, with a privilege today to speak with our class treasurer, Andrea Shue. Andrea, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
So this
Hi,
one's
everyone
about
out there.
exactly. So as many of you may know, we're having discussion groups to promote personal connections and growth at our reunion. We've got a bunch of different topics. One of them is parenting kids with special needs or disabilities more broadly. And I'm here to talk to Andrea about the fact that what it's been like for both of us in raising, in both cases, twins with special needs.
And in both cases, I believe identical twins,
Yeah, that's right. That's
different
right.
genders, different
Different
genders.
genders. Um,
Yeah, I mean, some of you know this, some of you don't. I have no idea, but my twins were born 17 weeks early at 23 weeks. I still today, when I tell people that, have to do the math for them. But they they were very, very early, and they spent 5 and 6 months in the NICU. And then one of my daughters came home with a tracheostomy. So we ran kind of a mini ICU in our apartment for about a year. And fortunately, surgery, she was able to have her trachea reconstructed and the tracheostomy removed. And so I'm pretty lucky in that I have two healthy kids.
mm.
They don't have any limiting medical conditions, but they were very developmentally delayed at the start, and they both have some real learning challenges, different learning challenges. I'm sure you can attest that identical twins might be identical genetically, but they are not identical in any other way. What about yours?
Mine are so my boys have profound autism, and that's attributable to a genetic mutation that they both had or have, and they have many common symptoms, but the way it manifests itself day to day is extremely different. So one son is so anxious; they're nonverbal with profound autism, and they both have severe communication and cognitive challenges, and one son is so anxious that he comes home and locks himself in his room. And when he goes to school, they have to clear out the hallways, and he goes into a converted closet that they made it into a classroom, and he communicates with his teachers via Zoom. The other son can go out in the community, but his vocal stimulations and OCD are so aggressive that my wife and I can't even talk in our own kitchen. So they have very different profiles, even though they're identical.
Yeah, and
Um,
what's funny, a little bit funny, I was thinking here, is that you and I left school and landed in the same place, landed
yeah, we started
a
our
few
career at
feet
Morgan Stanley
away from
together.
yeah, a few feet away from each other at Morgan Stanley, same floor. You were the bullpen right next to mine. Um, and life has taken us in pretty different directions, but we both have a set of twins who are not very close to what typical kids are like.
No,
Um, and I think, that causes you as a person to change quite a lot. I know that I quit my career. I became a full-time parent when my kids landed in the NICU because I felt I needed to be there every day. It wasn't something I had planned to do. I had planned to continue working.
mhm.
Um, but when I look back on it, it's now been 16 years for me. I I have to say it's changed me for the better. I think I was born a cynical baby. I was a very cynical person. Still
Well,
am a little.
tell me more. How has it changed you personally?
So I'm much more positive and optimistic than I used to be. I had to,
Mm.
adopt a growth mindset. I was lecturing actually. I get into I'm a much better advocate maybe than I used to be. It was getting into a little tussle with one of the kids' teachers, and I was lecturing them on the need to have a growth mindset. And I was like, look, quite literally, had I not had a growth mindset, these two might still be, 1 pound each, which is where they were born. Look how much they've grown. But my kids, I have found, will take a very circuitous route. Sometimes goes backwards a lot, then forwards, and then backwards again, and up and down to get to some goal that they're supposed to achieve. Um, and on that route, I think I found a lot more joy than I would have expected you could find, because maybe I
You
manage my own
appreciate little things a lot
expectations.
more?
Yeah, there's a lot more joy in
Yeah.
small things. Maybe I think I take more joy in the fact when the sun comes out and I see flowers. But in your children, every little piece of progress is it's so hard to get there. You know that they've worked so hard. You know that if you're lucky enough, you have a team of people who have worked so hard to support them to get there, that once they do get there, even if it seems minuscule, there's a ton to celebrate. And I think that having that in my life is great. I don't know that I would have had that otherwise had I not been in this position. And what about you, Alma? Because I know that you run a business, you work full time, and you take care of your kids.
Well, yeah, I didn't have to make at least as fundamental a choice as you did, in the sense that my wife made the decision to be the primary caretaker for my sons, which I'm grateful for every single day. So my work isn't as hard as hers. But what I have done is like, look, as you said, you adopted a growth mindset. I call it mindfulness. And for me, just it's really taught me the challenge and the adversity. And I won't shy away from it. I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but it's not easy. Raising two sons who are 21 years old who can't talk and take care of themselves and go to the bathroom themselves and take showers by themselves. But hey, if I can go for a walk along around the block with one of my sons and see a smile on his face, and if my other son can, I can walk into his room and instead of aggressing towards me, he puts me in a headlock and starts giggling and plays a song for me, that's a good day. That's a really good day. And the way that translates into my everyday life is I tend not to be as reactive to things and triggered by things that in the broader scheme of things are less significant to me. So I'd say that's the thing it's changed me in the most fundamental way.
Yeah. I think another thing that changed for me, and I can't tell you where I've ended up with this, is that um, and maybe not as goal oriented either, because I
Hmm.
don't really know what the appropriate goal should be in many instances. And so instead, I measure a little bit of progress versus saying, well, I know many of our peers may be looking at colleges for their kids, and they have a certain type of college that they might have in mind, or a certain type of degree, um, or a certain career that they hope that their child might go into. For me, those are all such unknowns. If I was to tell you any of them, I think it would be, a wild, very, very super wild guess, maybe more than a normal parent. And so I don't really go there. And I don't know if that's just deferring difficult decisions and choices, or a better way to parent children who don't have a necessarily, they don't, there aren't as many kids who have gone along the same path. So um,
I won't say
that's
better
one
or
thing I do.
worse. I won't say better or worse, but I'd say different. And I'm happy to be more present along my journey versus, as you said, completely, at least in my case, I used to be completely goal oriented around the only thing that matters is the outcome.
Mhm,
And that's one way to live. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but what I've learned is like when you accept the fact that your sons aren't going to go to college or aren't are likely never to have a job of their own, are likely not to get married, the common traditional notions of stages in life, quote unquote success, achievement, um, get completely turned on their heads.
mhm,
And of course, it makes me, and sounds like you, reflect more on what's important to us and our priorities. And so even in terms of how I lead, now of course, we have an EBITDA target for this year. I want to hit our EBITDA target. But what I really want to do is make sure along this journey, my team, I have the right people on my team leading people in the way I want them to lead to produce better outcomes. Whether we hit our EBITDA target or not is a byproduct of our culture, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And so I'm even less goal oriented at work. And again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just in terms of my own philosophy, it's changed quite a bit. It's about the journey, not the outcome itself.
yeah. And then what about you know, your village? I mean, everyone says, um, I think one thing we didn't mention, Ahmed, I don't know if you want to go there, but you have another child as well,
Sure.
who is a typical child. I have
He's
just
24.
my
Yeah.
two twins. Um, but you know, whether you have a typical child or an atypical child, everyone says it takes a village to raise a child, and I think they're
Hmm.
right. Who are the people in your village, or what type of people have you found along the way to help you?
So many people. Because, things can be so tough at home, there are very few people that are close to me in my life that don't really understand what's happening at home because it affects everything. My wife and I don't travel together because we can't leave the boys behind. Um, it means that sometimes on occasion I just drop everything, including business trips, if there's a crisis at home. And so I feel it's incumbent upon me not to withhold information about what's happening at home to the people that matter to me. So,
Hmm.
broadly speaking, I have a close group of colleagues at work, friends, many of whom we went to college with, um, and family. Not a lot of people across any of those spectrum, but a handful of people in each of those areas. So, my world is smaller, but I would like to argue is deeper, meaning
Yeah,
the connections I have. For me, I feel I'm not judging anybody else's connections, but I feel like they're deeper and more meaningful than they otherwise would have been because I have to make myself vulnerable, or I feel like I want to make myself vulnerable to those people. And they, in turn, I feel have made themselves more vulnerable to me than they would have if they didn't know about my personal circumstances. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah. Yeah, I think the same thing. It's a smaller circle. I think most people who I'm close to in my circle um, know about my kids, but they still question it. So my kids, one of my daughters attends a general education school, a mainstream school, and the other
Mhm.
one attends a specialized school for students with learning disabilities. Um, but I'm really fortunate. They both are currently taking themselves to school on the subway, which is not something I necessarily thought they could do, but they're doing that now. And so,
I
and
love it when they surprise
they
us.
look pretty typical. And so even with people who know how they started off, there are still expectation. There's still a kind of lack of understanding that, well, there are some things they just can't do. So, for example, I've been talking to parents about once you get to high school, I think they probably have this in every state. There's like a certain number of hours that you have to spend in PE,
Yeah.
which I was not familiar with because we didn't have it in middle school or lower school. And it's kind of it's kind of a pain for my kids because it's the PE is during a time where they'd rather be in chorus or singing or something. And the way to get out of this is to join a sports team. And I
Hmm.
can't tell you how many people it's like, well, you should put them in sports. I'm like, but there isn't a single sport that they can play. And they're like, it doesn't matter. They should go in any sports. I said, but you don't, my daughters have no peripheral vision. So when I said they don't have any limiting medical conditions, that is a medical condition they have. They only have central retinas. And they have very fragile retinas because their retinas were treated with lasers. So they're really not supposed to play any ball sports because if they get hit in the head with something, their retina can just detach. So that it takes that conversation with almost all my friends, even though they know who my kids are to
Well,
explain, tell
I
me
think,
which of these sports can they play like that. And they're like, oh, she can't see the ball coming at all. I'm like, no, she cannot see it coming at all.
well, I think you just touched on something that is fairly obvious, but may not be fully appreciated by people who aren't parenting special needs kids, is to advocate for our kids and to explain their unique circumstances. We have to be better communicators, and we have to, well, I have to, we choose to, I choose to, not get triggered in the face of people who don't get it. It's because I talk to
Hmm.
people all the time. Like somebody was telling me, "Oh, you should send one of your sons to this farm down the street, and he can work on the farm this summer." I'm like, dude, like I'm trying to get him to walk in, step foot into our backyard. Like there's a, to get to a farm, I got to, he's got to get into a vehicle with people that, in that in and of itself, he doesn't actually go into a vehicle without being harnessed. And I'm the only person that drives the vehicle that he can be in right now. So there's like, for people to understand that, we as parents, I think, have to communicate more and have to be more patient, because it's totally understandable that the person on the other side doesn't get it, because it's a different life.
Yeah, yeah. And it can look very similar though. And that's,
Yeah, in your
um,
case in particular, right?
yeah. And but even, if someone looks at you, Ahmed, and your career, I think many of our classmates are going to say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe Ahmed is running the company that he's running and has also had all of this going on."
Yeah,
Um, you know, I think that's the other side of it, is that people sometimes look at the parents and say, "Hey, but you look like everything's, you know,
I see what you mean.
copacetic."
Yeah,
Um, and so I think one of the things is, once your kids get to a certain age, you're not in, hopefully, you're not in crisis mode at all times, right? You have, you get into a routine, and you do have the people that you can rely on. We have a speech therapist, for instance, who lives in our building.
I call them the
Amazing.
angels
Yeah.
in my life.
And if something goes really wrong with communication and speech, I can send her iMessage, and she's like, try this, try that. So we have those kind of things. And so your life stabilizes into somewhat of a routine, um, and you're not panicked and as anxious all the time as maybe you were earlier in the beginning, uh, and when they're growing at that rate in the early years, things are changing constantly every hour or so, and then it stabilizes a bit. But yeah, it's interesting always to meet new people and see how they react. I don't know if you get this, but I was saying I get a lot of, if I launch into, sometimes I don't say anything. If I do decide I'm going to open up to someone, I often get the eyes glazing over. And a long time ago, a therapist told me it's because people don't like to hear bad things about kids and babies. Kids and babies are supposed to be cute and
Makes them
happy and
uncomfortable. Yeah,
healthy. Yeah.
I'm not sure what to say. Don't want to be insensitive. No, I see that, and the way I've seen that also play out in my life, Andrea, is even some of my closest friends don't want to share challenges they're experiencing, because they're making a judgment that their challenges aren't as significant as quote unquote mine. And what I think we all want is connection with people and
Yep.
love. And like, don't worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
it's all relative. Um, you know, yes, my son needs help in the bathroom. Your son or daughter might be frustrated with playing JV lacrosse. I don't know.
Right.
But it's all relative.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think as
No,
parents,
and
we just want our kids to be happy in the end.
I hope so. I think that's where everyone is now, is that we all want our kids to be happy. I think in previous generations, my parents might have wanted me to achieve something because it would reflect on them. I think I don't have those expectations anymore.
My
Um,
wife has accused me of having such expectations for our typical daughter, and I've sat with that, and I hope I'm beyond that. At least I think I am, but It's natural.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to not only you again, Amit, in person, but a bigger group of folks when we get to these discussion sessions at Reunion. I know we've had,
Sign up,
yeah,
everybody.
everyone sign up, go one, register, and then two, you get to pick from, what is it now, 7, 8 discussion groups?
We've got
Um,
8.
yeah, in
We've
two
got
different sessions. So you can do two.
2 to 4 p.m.
Um,
on Saturday of reunion.
and we've got folks like Ahmed and me for every single discussion group that will help lead the discussion. And I think this is going to be a
Facilitate the
great way
discussion.
to
You're not going to have
connect.
to listen to us the whole time.
No one's going to be on a panel. No one's going to lecture.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you,
Thanks,
Andrea.
everyone. Bye.